Every year, TD proudly sponsors a YWCA initiative to recognize extraordinary women of distinction, women who've made an impact in areas like business, education, healthcare, labor, and so much more. This year, one of the recipients spent decades driving change in the labor movement. She was the youngest and first woman of color elected to what would become Unifor's National Executive Board, which took her to leadership roles at other global labor organizations as well. Today, her focus is on advancing workers' rights and the future of Ontario's universities. Here to tell us her story is Jenny On, Executive Director of the Ontario Confederation of University Faculty Associations. It is lovely to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
It's an extraordinary award for extraordinary work, so nice to see this. Can you, if you wouldn't mind, just start by telling us a little bit about you, your life experience, and why you've chosen to do the work that you do?
Sure. I believe that it almost wasn't a choice. Growing up here in Canada as a woman of color, I experienced different inequalities, both on the racism end, but being, a young girl and a woman. And so whenever I was faced with those inequalities, I also grew up in a fairly traditional family with an older brother who got treated very differently than myself, and that kind of frustrated me. And so that also drove me to make the changes both within, my family, but also what was happening in the workplace and just broader in society. So it was kind of a natural way for me to want to get involved and make these changes. First, it was about myself, but then I realized, my goodness, the system is messed up. And I also, on a personal note now, have a teenage daughter, so I'm very much interested in hoping that things will continue to progress and change for her and all young women for the future.
It's amazing the work you've done, and I think what I find interesting is, there's a lot of women who experience what you've experienced, a lot of women of color who experience as well too, but not everybody does what you did. What would you say is something that maybe made a difference there?
Well, I've had a lot of wonderful opportunities, quite honestly, through the union, as I worked in a place that I saw problems in the workplace, and then it was through the union I learned how you can make those changes, working with the employer to make things better, not just for myself or women workers, but for everyone in the workplace. And then that vehicle, the union, made me realize, how do you make more broader, sweeping, like structural changes to fight systemic, racism or sexism? And so it was through policies, through legislative change. It was through working with other women that made that difference. And so I was able to do that. So if I think about one of the examples, so many years ago in the union, back then it was the Canadian Auto Workers Union, I worked with Ford Motor Company, but also with McGregor Socks. And McGregor Socks was predominantly women workers who didn't have the time rushing to work, rushing home to go to see a doctor. So we worked together to bring a mobile health unit, kind of like a super fancy RV that sat in the workplace parking lot where the women could then go on their lunch breaks to get their annual checkups, a breast examination, a pap smear, get a medication because they were not feeling, good. So it was a way to help those workers get the medical needs that they needed, but also be productive and continue to work. And so all around, I think it was, quite a success working together. And that's the kind of things that we're able to do with the union, working with employers, working with different companies to make really positive change. So that was an exciting project to be a part of.
It's a great project, and I think it highlights, sometimes strategic problems need to be handled tactically, because that makes such a difference in terms of those women. I'm not going to have time to cover everything you've done, because you've done a lot, hence the award that you're getting right now. What are you most focused on right now?
Well, right now at ACUFA, we are focused on ensuring that our universities continue to be funded properly. There has been chronic underfunding for decades. And what we're also seeing is that the demographics are showing that there are more young people today than there were, if you recall, now I'm showing my age, of the double cohort years when we got rid of grade 13. Yeah. So more young people potentially interested in going to university. But then if we're not funding those numbers, then a lot of Ontario kids and Canadian kids won't have access to go to university if they so choose, and of course, if they're academically inclined to go. So we want to ensure that the broader public and that any government understands the importance of what universities bring, the value of universities, not just to the individual, but again, to our broader economy. And we want to just make sure that universities remain accessible, again, and affordable for young people, because it really makes a huge difference in their lives.
Can you maybe talk a bit about that? Because I know you highlight and you've talked about the fact that it makes a huge difference in people's lives, especially for women, but still there's a pay gap that remains.
There is, sad to say, but here in Ontario today, there is a pay gap of 88 cents for a woman worker, where their male counterpart earns that full dollar. And then if you drill down further and you are a racialized or an Indigenous woman, it's then 62 cents for every dollar your male counterpart earns. So we're still trying to shorten that pay gap. And so when you go to university, it not only makes you more resilient, and it's really important today with our economic times, but university graduates have higher earnings over their lifetime. 70% more than a high school graduate, and a university graduate will earn 40% more than a college graduate. So really important for all young people, but especially, of course, for women and those from equity-deserving groups, because we can see through that pay equity gap that we're still not earning on the same dollar. And so university is one of those vehicles that can really change someone's economic status. And it's so important, of course, to contributions, not just to their self, to their families, and then to the broader community and the broader economy overall.
Absolutely. So. I think I was reading in some of the work that again, you've talked about, that even when you're thinking about how pay gaps happen and maybe pay changes that need to place, it's not always, it could be things like not even a percentage change, a dollar change, because that has a disproportional impact depending where you are in the pay scale as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So when we go into negotiations, for example, you could say, let's have a percentage wage increase. Everybody has 3% a wage increase.
Yeah.
But if you're at the top end of that workplace in the pay scale, and somebody is in the lower pay scale, and it's often women and other equity deserving groups that are not at the top end, well, that 3% for this person is way higher than someone at this wage. So we try to do it by cents per hour. So let's say everybody gets $1, so everybody moves in the same way so that the pay gap doesn't continue to increase. So it's so important just thinking about those ways of how do we ensure that everyone gets treated in a fair and more equitable way.